Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series, our show where I have a chat with a member of the Arsenal community about the ongoing current troubles, I suppose. I was going to say really good stuff, but I can't because, you know, the way that Arsenal is right now. I'm very happy to be joined by Turkish. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, well, like I said before the stream, Tom, if we'd done this show a couple of weeks ago, it would have been a very different mood. But a couple of games has changed it all, and yeah, it's unfortunate. I didn't think we would lose to Brighton. Hence, when we arranged this last week, I would have thought we bounced back with a win, and we'd be talking. Yeah. I would be talking more confidently about the top four race, but we'll get into it anyway. I'm all good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good, considering, as you say, the circumstances of the situation. It's a frustration. Obviously, we're going to go into a lot of that and more. But yeah, it's frustrating is the word. I feel right now is really frustrated with the situation. Let's not waste any time and just throw at me your current kind of mood right now around the club and where you're feeling about our current situation.
It's an unfortunate end to what seemed like it was going to be a positive season.
You say ends now, right? You're saying ends
for me. Yeah, in my opinion, I think after the Brighton one in particular, the Palace one, I had that doubt whether we could do it Monday night against Vieira, the added incentive. I actually predicted to be a draw. Obviously in hindsight, we definitely would have taken that. It wasn't that, but going into Brighton, I assumed would beat Brighton, and I thought Villa would potentially take something off Tottenham, and then would be back to square one, let's say, this week. Yeah. But in the end, we lost twice before Tottenham even played their next game. And then when they did, they handled business pretty early as well. And that's just I guess that adds to the anger, the upset, the frustration, it being Tottenham, and obviously we've got a North London derby to come. Yeah, it's an interesting one. All round, I think the decisions against Brighton in terms of the lineup and particular players in certain positions. Listen, once, Tom, I understand it. Learn from your mistakes, and that once should have been last year around the Villarreal game when we done pretty much the same thing, and it cost us. And in hindsight, it probably cost us Champions League football potentially. Again, potentially that's what's happened again with the same mistake. I don't only look at the manager. I look off the field too. I look at January window in particular. But I'm also looking at last summer where we signed particular players to add depth into certain positions. And then in those certain positions, one of them is not trusted. The other one's deemed not ready. Up until this last week, in terms of the last two games, Tom, the summer transfer window from last summer, it was deemed by me as well a very, very strong window because it built a base, it built a foundation. Now, don't get me wrong, that's that hasn't changed 360 in just two games. What's happened is now it's more of a good transfer window than what we thought was a great one. And me, Tom, over the years, I've maintained Kroenke and the ownership being the main problem and off the pitch and whatnot. And that's why when things like this happen, I know people might say knee-jerk, people might say, someone like Turkish was waiting for it. Believe you me, I wasn't waiting for this. I would have loved nothing more than to make top four this season. Whether you think it's ahead of schedule, I don't, but, it is what it is. That's what we needed, in my opinion, to further expose this ownership because I believe they'll be content with top four like they was on the Wenger. But that's another debate. So, yeah, in terms of my general mood, Tom, I don't want to take up too much of the intro and whatnot because I know we're going to get into it. I've been, I've been watching your stuff for years. You pose good questions.
Thanks,
we differ in opinion sometimes and we agree on a lot, sometimes. So it'll be an interesting half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I like you, I think, was frustrated if we're just focusing kind of the closed analysis on the last two games. Again, the frustrated with the repeated mistakes. The decision to put Granit Xhaka at left back when that was one of the big reasons why we got kicked out of European football last season when we used Xhaka there in the left back position away at Villarreal, sacrificing the quality in the central midfield, really hitting Nuno Tavares' confidence by dropping him from the side as well when he's your backup left back, and now you're attacking the rest of the season with a player, if you are going to put him back in, having now had that confidence hit, he's not going to be in the right frame of mind particularly. you're absolutely right to point out the January window. I've maintained that since that deadline day that we made errors, and not bringing in a replacement for Aubameyang. I didn't have that much of an issue with Aubameyang being moved on. If that's what the manager wants to do, I've been calling for accountability in the squad for years and years and years. And if you're going to breach whatever the manager's laid out, then you face the consequences of that, in my view. But not bringing in a replacement to bring in those goals that we would have lost and have lost is, for me, probably the biggest reason why we're not pressing ahead with a top 4 challenge. That said, one of the things that I know that we disagreed on when you joined the chat box, I think it was for Lee Judge's show a couple of weeks back. Yeah. And obviously that's one of the things that sparked me reaching out to you to have a chat, because I knew it would be a good discussion about this, was about the idea of why we're in a top 4 race this season. Because obviously at the start of the season, the expectation from my end, and I can only speak for me and maybe some of the listeners that mirror that, is that it was 5th, 6th. That's about where I thought Arsenal would finish this year. And to get back into European football as a minimum, and I don't count the Conference League when I say European football, because it's just not European football. And it's a route back into the Champions League as well, of course, as we know all too well by now. Then getting into kind of a top 4 race, there's been something that which you pointed out in the chat box, is that, we're there because of, and one of the large factors being the disappointment of Manchester United and, the early season disappointments, I suppose, if you would describe it, of Tottenham before they've, kind of turned things around. I personally think that that's harsh to describe it in that sense, but I want to let you, explain that point of view as to why you feel that is such a large factor in this.
There's various factors to it, but it is a big factor because, listen, I hold my hands up. At the beginning of the season, I didn't even think we'd be top 6. I thought that would be a struggle. Yeah. So to where we are now, of course, it's better than most of us expected this season. I think I don't think I met anyone at the start of the season predicting would make top 4, let alone challenge for it. And in turn, with about 9 games to go, we're there or thereabouts, and there's still a chance mathematically. But let's be honest, Man United, everyone expected them to be doing better than they are now. And if they're doing better than they are now, they're not too far behind us. They'd be ahead of us. Spurs is a funny one because I don't think people expected much of them, especially when they made that Nuno appointment. Obviously, they got Kane. They kept Kane, which was a massive, which was a big thing in the summer, because I've watched Arsenal Football Club move into a stadium and lose big players and tell us we're losing these big players because we need to pay off the stadium. But then Spurs, from down the road, who have no history, haven't won anything, managed to build a stadium and then keep their best player, their biggest player, refusing a 100 million offer, 100+ million offer, refusing to even entertain it. If we listen to Pep Guardiola. So even with Tottenham in the summer, the Nuno appointment, we all laughed at it, but they still made a big sign of ambition, let's say. So I assumed, we'd be in a tussle potentially for a top 6 position. Instead, we're in a tussle for top 4. But this ain't me dissing where we are, because we deserve credit for being where we are with such a young side.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is a big factor, Tom. And I think, especially on that show when it's coming across in a live chat, it's very blunt. There's no, depth behind it.
Hence why I asked you on to, flesh it out. Yeah.
Yeah. But don't get me wrong. If Man United are doing better and Tottenham are doing what we would have thought with Kane and Son's new contract and so on, we'd still not be too far behind. And I guess, based off of a summer where a lot of us doubted the quality of the signings and the 50 million on Ben White, Ramsdale coming in, let's be honest, a lot of us, including myself, I had major doubts about it. Based off of all that, the young side and Arteta, because you said January was a sticking point for you, it was definitely a sticking point for me. But ever since the Arsenal draw to Burnley 0-0, Arteta and the squad have made us not forget January, but ignore January.
Yeah. It's the right word.
All up until now. So I give the young side credit for being where they are. I'm not putting them down, saying that if Man United and Tottenham were doing what they should be doing, we wouldn't necessarily be in a top 4 race. But I'm giving them credit for still achieving more than I thought they would. I guess achieving is the wrong word because we haven't achieved nothing. But in terms of developing the way they have. So, for me, it's a big factor. For me, it's a big factor, Tom. And again, that factor plays a part in my hope, belief, ambition for next season. Because if Tottenham are the ones to now go get top four, and it looks like, in my opinion, they will be, Conte, we know Conte is a top class manager. Yeah, we know that. If he gets Champions League money, he gets the support that he will need. Then, God forbid, Tottenham are going to be a force. And then you have Man United, who have tried something. It hasn't worked each and every time. They're going to try something again. If Ten Hag comes in, yes, at first glance, it looks like, oof, they're serious now. But when Ronaldo, Sancho, and Varane came in, everyone thought, oof, they're serious now. Similar to Di Maria, Falcao, Pogba, all of them, Jose Mourinho. So with Man United, it's a bit iffy. But if Ten Hag comes in and he does what he's been doing, over at Ajax in a bigger way at Man United, then they're going to be a force.
Yeah.
So I just think not making Champions League football this year for the money, because I just don't want to be in a tournament to be in a tournament's sake. Like, we was in Champions League how many years on end, and towards the end, it was just making it just to be in there and get the money, and just whatever happens, happens. I want to go back in there, get the money, and hope that these Kroenkes have actually changed their ways. So as much as I think it's a fact that this season that Man United, Tottenham underachieving has played a part in us being where we are in the race and whatnot, I also think that next season it's going to play another part.
Yeah, I think the message that you left in the chat definitely, and you highlighted there, the context of which you can understand a full point needs to be fleshed out, and I think you've done it. And I think that, I look at more of the reason why we're in a top four race is down to our own merit, and how we've won so many games and we've turned some real things around. Like, you look at the results against teams like Wolves and Aston Villa and Leicester, teams that we dropped ridiculous amounts of points to in the last few seasons. You can see that progression there. You can see how many points we're better off this season compared to last. The changes in the transfer market. One thing I'm actually quite unclear on is where your head is at with Arteta, because, is it a case of if we miss out on top four, that's enough of a reason to say we should look to change coach, or is it top six, or is it more so the face value that you make a judgment on whether or not he should move on or not, and the contract as well?
You know what it is, Tom? I just don't see. I'm going to go back to me always putting it to the Kroenkes. I just don't see the sense, in us continually going for managers, essentially giving the clean slate to the Kroenkes again, when the reality is that they are the ones that held back every single one we've gone through in the past few years. Wenger, Emery, and now Arteta. I think you just said the change in windows. Now, I would have thought that from the summer, but what January done is made me doubt that change. Because going into it, I think in the first few days, Arteta said something along the lines of, you can't miss a step in any window in this league. Arteta said that. I don't think that's the direct quote, but he basically said you can't afford to, slip up in any transfer window, right? And then we went on to slipped up. Exactly. Yeah. So Arteta, for his whole time here, has said that the Kroenkes have supported him, they backed him, he's been an advocate and whatnot. Cool. And it seemed like they have up until January, where, Tom, talk to me. If a manager says that and then has the January window that we had, does that really make sense to you? Does that seem like it was in his hands?
From my perspective of, covering and following the window, it looked as if we were kind of, going for this striker situation. The Vlahovic situation was there. Similar to the Locatelli situation in the summer before. Clearly, that player had his eyes set on a move to Juventus, and eventually that move materialised. I feel like if the opportunity to sign a striker was there and feasible, and they felt that the profile of player was there and available, they would have got them. That's how I feel about that. That's not me saying whether that's the right decision, because I still think they should have had contingencies in place, to move after someone at least for the next 6 months, or someone who's a younger profile with more potential that still offered you more than Eddie Nketiah offers us for the last 6 months. I'm really conflicted on the Kroenke situation. And I remember when we last spoke, which I think was about a year ago on the channel. I was very much on your side of things with get them out as soon as possible, and because they're, what's going on is not good enough, and we need someone that's going to come in that's got more to care. In that year, since we last spoke, it's been interesting to do, I think, more of my own due diligence into kind of the research around what's happened since the 2018 full takeover, the kind of speak to a few people who were more in the know about kind of what happens with ownership of clubs if you only have a partial kind of ownership, you know, not the majority shareholding that they had prior to fully buying things out. And whilst I have no doubt in my mind that Stan Kroenke couldn't give a toss about Arsenal Football Club in terms of what they achieve, and despite him being a very good speaker in Josh Kroenke, there is still part of me that thinks that there is a bit of, you know, there's a lot more care from him, you know, than there is from Stan. And that there is an element of he wants to see the team go back, and he's confident in also the regime that's currently here. There's efforts to be made to try and improve the relationship between them and the fans. I don't think they've been enough. I think more needs to be done. And I've been very critical about the fact that he wasn't at the last fans forum, and he definitely should have been. And that was a missed opportunity. Yep. But there's been stuff, you know, they've done some stuff. I want to see more, but there's more than we have seen. I think Sophie raised the point from the Highbury squad talking about why would you invest in something that you're not a majority shareholder of, if you know what I mean? And I'll pitch that to you because I know that you're very passionate on this topic. So do you think it's enough of a reason, I don't use the word excuse because I hate that word, but, you know, a reason that they weren't, say, investing or they weren't, say, putting money in up until that point in 2018? And when people say they haven't put any money in, I do think there's a slight inaccuracy in that claim because of what's happened recently with the refinancing, which is what owners do. You know, it's what Liverpool have done. It's what Spurs have done. You know, it's the ownership refinancing of loans. That is money that the club now owed, like the same way that Chelsea owed money towards Roman Abramovich. It's in the same sense that we now owe the Kroenkes that money because of the refinancing. Does that, in your viewers, like in your viewing of it, see as investment in the same way? Because we've still invested quite heavily in transfers.
Yeah, like I get that argument with the majority ownership, and I get the side that you wouldn't want to invest when you don't own. But at the same time, would you want to then take over the business and every year since it be a loss-making business because you haven't paid that due diligence during the majority ownership? That also doesn't make sense to me. And even not listen. Usmanov now, it seemed like a very wise decision that we didn't go with, obviously. But let's just say at the time when none of this is happening, what's happening now, at the time, he was a 30% shareholder and he wasn't even allowed on the board to have a say or give his money in, you know. Essentially, he even came out and said, I just want to, you know, give some money in and improve Arsenal. I want to give it to Wenger in particular. Now, Kroenke could have let that happen and still be majority owner and allowed our club to at least, you know, carry on. Well, not carry on because at that time he was in decline, but turn that decline around and start moving forwards. So I don't know the ins and outs, and you've probably spoken to more knowledgeable people than me on the subject. But outside looking in, I just feel like the majority ownership and only talking about 2018 to now also lets them off for a lot. Are we because they didn't want to invest because Usmanov owned 30%? Are we meant to forgive them for that? Now, even since and the money we've spent, yes, we've spent money, 100%. We spent more money than we did before.
Everyone
that.
Last summer,
yeah, exactly. But even last summer, we spent 150 million, Tom. But I believe he put 100 million debt back on the club, if I'm not mistaken. It's around the 100 million mark.
Sure.
So essentially, if you I don't know all the ins and outs, but those two pieces of information to tell me we spent 150 mil, but we also in debt another 100 mil. So did we, people like to talk about net spend and all of this stuff. Well, do the net spend there and it's closer to 50 mil. Now, again, I don't know all the ins and outs, but January happens and you talk about the right profile of player and people that, talk about the right profile of player. I'll ask them about Tavares and Lokonga, because if we're only going after the right profile of player, then surely our signings from last summer should be ready now to do a job when called upon. But they're not ready. So are we signing players for the right profile, or are we signing them that are not ready and hoping? Essentially, both arguments don't make sense together. So, the success of the window in Ramsdale, in Tomiyasu, in Odegaard, Ben White, the success of those players in terms of development and what they've showed on the pitch, yes, it looks like it is a good window because the majority of the signings have settled in well. But then those two that have let it down, and then the January window on top of that, Forget Aubameyang for a sec, because I'm with you on that. Sell him, cool, but replace him. But then if you have 70 mil, if Arsenal Football Club spent 150 mil last summer, and then all of a sudden we've got 70 million to spend in January, Tom.
Yeah.
And then, cool, if I say, where's the plan B striker? People will say, oh, we didn't want to panic. Essentially, it wouldn't be panicking because I'll bring up Eddie and Lacazette's contracts ending. And I'll say it wouldn't be panic if you're already proactively looking to replace them. You'd have a list ready. So you don't need to replace Oba in January, but replace Lacazette or Eddie. All right, cool. We don't want to panic. We needed a midfielder. We also need other positions here and there. So if we had 70 million to spend, I'm not you, Tom. If you have the January window to sign a presenter for your channel, and you ask a guy on the first, second day of the month, I want you, and the guy, he answers. Sometimes he doesn't answer. You're dubious about whether he wants it. Are you waiting all the way till the end of that window where you can sign a presenter, or halfway through? Are you going to tell him to make a decision? And if not, move on. Surely that's the sensible thing to do.
You're right, it is the sensible thing. What I would say, to play devil's advocate, and in part also one of the reasons that I would give maybe why we didn't, is because say that presenter in this example is someone who can absolutely take you to the next level in terms of that position, and that the other options that you could go for in the window in that position are just nowhere near the same level, or that are just simply aren't gettable during the January window. The clubs aren't selling, or if they are selling, it's for a stupid fee that's not reflective of that player's, or that presenter in this case's quality, right? I'm trying to stick with your analogy here. But in regards to that movement, I can see why they waited, because there still was, Juventus in this case. Let's say, I don't know, Harry Symeou, the Chronicles of a Gooner, is Juventus, and he's going after this presenter. And they want to go to Harry, and I don't blame him. But I look at that and I go, I can see why they waited. But if Harry was at this point iffing and erring in the analogy about it, and they didn't know whether they're going to afford it now, and then Arsenal really pushing hard, forced, Juve in this example, to go and get Vlahovic, I understand why it took as long as it did. What I can't get my head around is that I know, in this analogy, that I would say need a presenter for the next 6 months, no matter what happens. Otherwise, I'm going to keep myself short, and I'm not going to be able to produce as much as I want to produce. So I would have a contingency in place to getting a temporary option for those last 6 months that I need, and then in the summer can go after the marquee option that I want to go for. That's why I think they waited. I don't think the issue was necessarily as long as they waited. I think it was more the issue around the contingencies that weren't there if they weren't to get their primary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. That argument only comes into the people that say, we didn't want them to panic. I just say, if you don't want them to panic, well then, give him a deadline, and then, accordingly, adjust your, go to your plan Bs, plan Cs, and so on. And again, you don't even need to go plan B, Cs in striker. Go to your plan A, B, C in midfield, because we needed reinforcements there as well. If we have 70 million to spend, Arsenal Football Club should and would have spent it, especially after the manager says that you can't afford to miss a window, especially when at the end of the season, that prize pot of, I don't know how much Champions League brings, but it must be over 100 mil.
Oh, it's
that prize
3 or 4 times more than Europa League, yeah.
Yeah, so that prize pot, surely that's worth taking a risk for. But the Kroenkes are notorious for not taking risks in the right moments, but they wasn't full owners then. So the argument just keeps on going in circles.
Do you think it was the owners this January that put the brakes on Arsenal being able to go after their contingencies? Because for me, I put that on Arteta and put that on Edu, because I remember the press conference that Arteta did after it closed, where he said, if we can't get the players that we want, we're not going to go and get them. If we don't think they're good enough, we aren't going to go and get them. So, which I understand, and I like that mentality, but you can't, cut your nose to spite your face. Like, you need to have that backup, and that's the criticism. But I don't think I'd put that on the ownership, because I feel like the money was there, as you say. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but I don't feel the money was there. I just feel like it was all. For me, I don't even believe we really went in for Vlahovic. I'll be honest with you. I think we just let that kind of, because I've seen it in the past, Tom. So it's not like I'm basing it off nothing. I've seen it in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised again. But you're right. I remember Arteta actually said Edu had a fantastic window, because it was Edu receiving the brunt of the criticism from January, because Arteta seems to have a force field around him where any criticism is not allowed. But listen, like you said, if Arteta's taken if Arteta's looking at that January window and saying himself, putting it on, I didn't find the right type of player, then Tavares and Lokonga, that question needs to be asked now. These are your players.
Yeah.
So in a crucial point of the season, how can you do the Xhaka left back again? Not only
I agree there.
You've done it again, but you've got a backup left back. And you've done it again, but with Lokonga solo in the middle instead of Partey, which is even weaker. So it's madness to me that it's done twice, Tom. You know, and then the side, like I said, there's contradictions throughout, because that would be a contradiction, right? Profile, not ready. It is not ready the right profile.
I understand the point. I think with Lokonga, I thought Lokonga was probably our best midfielder up until he was dropped against Manchester United in the first half of the season. You know, I thought he started the season really, really strongly. He was really, really good in so many fixtures. I remember the Leicester game, the Newcastle game, the Aston Villa game at home in particular. He really stood out in those games. The Watford game. Was it the Watford game? I think it might have been. And you look at kind of those performances for the first half and you're thinking, don't drop this guy when Xhaka comes back, because, you know, Xhaka's not been particularly great. He had a great North London derby, but besides that, and before the injury, you know, he wasn't really offering too much. So when he dropped him for Xhaka in the game against Man United and then followed that up in the game against Everton as well, that was really disappointing. In the same way that Tavares never really got an opportunity to gain confidence back after the whole Nottingham Forest debacle. And again, he had performances in the first half of the season where he kept Tierney out the team. Even after Tierney had returned from his injury, he stuck with Tavares because you couldn't drop him because he was being that good. So I think actually, I don't think it's necessarily about that those two weren't good enough or that they're not ready. I actually think that Arteta's mistake is making them more vulnerable than they needed to be. He's made, you know, Tavares more vulnerable with the decision making. He's made Lokonga vulnerable against Brighton by putting Xhaka at left back and putting Lokonga in a situation where he's the lone pivot with only Martin Odegaard, you know, as your other midfielder that's not going to offer you any protection. So I think that's where the criticism of Arteta is absolutely fair and right. But again, for me, it's always going to fall back on January. Just to tackle a couple of points in the chat box, and thanks for the donation, Jashar. It says, fellas, January compounded what I thought was personally a poor summer window. We didn't improve the midfield or attack from last season, and we renewed Xhaka's contract. Xhaka is a big stumbling block for me. With Xhaka, and I'm assuming you've watched his thing today. Have you seen it yet? Yeah. Obviously, it's a very interesting viewing. You know, it hit me a bit, kind of talking about, because we cover obviously abuse on the channel a lot, and talking about that. We did a really good show of Harry yesterday. If listeners, you haven't checked it out, please do. How did that make you feel when you were watching that? What was your reaction? Because obviously, you know, being on AFTV, I suppose, you know, you can get brandished at times, and I know that, and you know, I've said this live on the channel, that a lot of effort has gone into, you know, really kind of changing the perception of AFTV of late as well. And you know, you're behind some of the really solid content that goes out there now. But is there any kind of I'll just start the straight question. Like, how did you feel like watching what Xhaka was talking about?
You know what, we talked about on AFTV earlier. And again, I every time I talk about this, whether it's AFTV here or my channel in the next few days, I have to separate it out, because, you know, the quotes and the comments about his kids, his wife, his personal life, that abuse, is not acceptable anywhere. You know, like I said earlier, I don't think I need to say that, but obviously in this day and age, if you're on camera, you need to say it. But, you know, it's a disgrace, and I'm completely against that. It shouldn't be happening. And like I said earlier, it's on the social media companies, because there's nothing the fans or people can do, or the players. You know, the social media companies have to clamp down in some way, shape or form. I'm not them. I don't know how to do it, but they have to find something, because it's not on. I get an awful lot of abuse over the years, and you know, it is what it is for me. I brush it off. But at points, you know, it does put you in a mood in terms of, you know what, like, especially early days in YouTube, I'll be messaging people back, like, you know, whereabouts do you live? Are you local? And this and that. And it's just, you know, you get into it, like, and I thought to myself, what's going on? Like, if I'm going to do this, I need to drop that mentality out. And then it is what it is. So separate that out now. If like I said, disgrace, unacceptable. Everything else in that interview for me was well spun.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because like you said, obviously what hit you was especially that type of abuse. So I'm with you on that. But the well-spun narrative for me is where there needs to be some accountability, Tom. similar to Josh Kroenke. Yeah, it's all good and well saying 2018 to now, or Xhaka saying, I want to be closer to the fans. But where is the accountability? We don't have it anywhere in the club. No one holds their hands up to their part to play or their mistakes. Yeah. Now, again, I have to put the abuse to the side and that, but there's sentences in there. For example, one sentence in particular was,
It's about the red yellow cards as well. That was a strange one for me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he said others, when he was talking about others get reds, others get yellows, and at the end he was like, but mine get a big story. Essentially, it's like no accountability.
Yeah.
He said, I had my notes somewhere earlier. I actually wrote notes down because I did the video earlier, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, he gets red cards. That's him. I don't care, to be honest, or something along those lines. And I just think to myself, but like, I get that. I guess people are going to give him credit, Tom, for being honest. He doesn't care. But as a fan of the club that you play for, surely you want him to care that these decisions are costing us at times. I'm not saying he's the pinnacle of our decline. He's been a part of it, a big part of it. But there's been other players over the years that have played a part in that. So a bit of accountability amongst the commentary about his feelings and about the connection. I think that would have helped bridge the gap more for me. But for me, the interview was pretty. It was hard hitting in one aspect, but in another aspect,
a missed opportunity maybe.
A very big missed opportunity, because this season in particular at games, because he talked an awful lot about, the games, the atmosphere, the fans, especially in that moment. This season in particular, it's been very different, home and away. And he's seen that because he's come over to the fans. Every time I've gone, he's come over and he's been a part of either the celebration or, a few of the losses he was part of. I don't know what you call that. But so it would have been nice for him to bridge that gap and say, but things are changing, and apologies for, not apologies. I guess you don't apologize for. I'm not even
yourself,
saying.
I suppose what he's going to say.
Where
he talked about, he said that cards are part of his game. I was trying to find the quote as well. He says, "Listen, the cards have always been part of my game. They were in Germany too. Remember the 50-50s. I'm all in, and it's the same in training. If I elbow a player, I'll be the first one to say I'm sorry, but a tackle, come on, guys, this is not ballet." And that was a really strange one. And I think you're right to separate up parts of the interview. Like, you can talk about the separate parts without, you can talk critically about what he's spoken about in regards to cards, whilst also, condemning the abuse. It's important that you separate them. And I agreed with you that part of the interview frustrated me because, there's an opportunity there to say, I get a lot of cards, and a lot of them, whilst we moan about, how Arsenal are treated and sometimes the behaviour profiling that goes on with some of our players, and Xhaka definitely is a victim of that. We saw that with the yellow card against Villa, where, Andrew Madley pointed to 3 fouls and he hadn't even made one all the entire game. It clearly happens, but there are moments of hot-headedness, and there are moments where he loses it, or he makes a silly challenge or a silly foul, and it's cost Arsenal and it's cost us in crucial moments. So I agree with you that there was a missed opportunity there to take responsibility for that and say, because all he had to say really was, look, I take responsibility for those mistakes, because if you get a red card 9 out of 10 times, unless it's the wrong decision, it's a mistake. And yeah, you're right in saying that he didn't take ownership of that. The interesting point I think that was made by the super chat was talking about kind of, we need to upgrade and move on. And it seems like he's going to stay as well, from what he's saying, he wants to achieve something special. My worry is, like we saw in the summer, that if he stays, that gives, there's not an excuse, but, a reason to not go and sign that midfielder that we need. Are you concerned that will happen?
Tom, I'm always concerned going into transfer windows. I'm always concerned. Listen, but we don't know anything. I don't know anything. I thought the 2019 summer, like a lot of us, was a very, very good summer. Pepe, Tierney, Martinelli, Saliba, and so I think one or two more. And we went on to finish 8th. Yeah, I think near the end maybe, but we went on to finish 8th twice. Yeah. So what do I know? This summer, this summer just gone, I thought it wasn't a good window. Essentially, it looks better than that window in 2019. So I've just got to leave it to them. But at the same time, like you said, Xhaka in that interview that got released, he mentioned Arteta's role to play in helping him stay at the club. That situation kind of happened again in the summer with the Roma links, and then he gets a new contract.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I thought we're finally moving on from him, and it's best for both parties. But then the turnaround didn't really make sense to me, because I asked myself, did Xhaka want to leave and that's why it was happening? Or did Arteta want to sell him and that's why it was happening? Because in the end, to sign a contract off the back of that, it was just a wild turnaround. So this summer, until last few weeks, a lot of people assumed we were selling him this summer. I personally don't know. I don't sit on either side of the fence. I don't know if we're going to sell him. I don't know if we're going to keep him. I don't really see any rumors either way, or any strong links either way. But you're right, actually. When you meant I'm going to lean towards he's staying, because you're right. That comment he said in the interview about achieving something, he's staying. Cool.
Yeah.
But we've got to upgrade. We've got to upgrade, because for years, listen, he's a 29-year-old central midfielder, yeah?
Yeah.
He's just been pushed up like to a more of a, what number do you call it? A 6, let's say?
Yeah, 6'8", kind of hybrid role. Yeah.
Yeah, in recent weeks. And I guess he's avoided the drama in that role, and he's added something to the game. I'm not going to say good in that role, because that role, you need a bit better. Again.
It's tailor-made for a different player, without a shadow of a doubt.
Exactly. So for all those years, he was central midfielder for us in a different role. It's like all of a sudden now at 28, 29, your role's been changed. Mm-hmm. So surely that number 6, number 8 position, surely Arteta has other plans for that. Yeah. I don't see it being, he goes in. I probably see more Partey being first option, Xhaka being Partey's backup, and then we have a 6.
And I think even Lokonga talked about himself as being more of an 8. And that's why I was so frustrated seeing him in the lone 6 role, is because he's good at progressing the ball. He wants to push the ball forwards. He's good at on the ball. The amount of times he dribbled through the Brighton team at the weekend, there were some really impressive ways in which he dribbled forwards and forced problems. Yeah. That's what he's good at, and that's what he needs to be allowed to flourish with. But put him in that 6 role, and he just doesn't. But I agree with you, and I look again, and it's ironic that we talk about Man City and the parallels between what Arteta's trying to achieve and what we see. And you see that he obviously operates Pep with either Rodrigo or Fernandinho kind of playing in that sole option. And then on the left-hand side, you either have Ilkay Gundogan, who is certainly, and you saw that especially last season, getting forward, scoring goals, getting in the box, or Bernardo Silva, who again is another, forward-thinking player, with Kevin De Bruyne playing where Martin Odegaard's playing for us right now. So I think you're right that it points towards that shift to the 4-3-3, that we would go for a more attacking option. I personally don't think Smith Rowe is right to play that role. I think you either play Smith Rowe as an out-and-out 10 if you want to put him centrally, or you keep him on the left, where I think he's flourished and really added goals to his game. So I get frustrated when he tries to do that, because I just don't think that role is made for him at all. Just want to pick up on this, and the rule Yanis says only 2 Arsenal content creators I watch. I find it very hard to think about Arsenal, let alone talk about them. So props to the both of you. After the next transfer window, will we finally have enough depth and quality? Because the depth has been what's lacking, Turkish. It's been when we've lost players as we have done now, it's costing us top 4. Tomiyasu not being here, Partey not being here, Kieran Tierney not being there, and the mistakes made in trying to replace them through unorthodox methods, because he's not happy with Tavares or not happy with whoever else he wants to put in midfield. It's costing us. So is there any confidence based upon what you saw in the summer and in January, on the lack of in January, that that we will add the necessary quality and depth?
What was that question? Is there anything I saw in January that makes me think that?
Well, just after the next transfer window, do you think we'll finally have enough depth and quality? But just, based upon the experiences that we've had in the last 2 windows.
Yeah. I big up Yanis as well. He's I haven't done much solo vids recently, but he's always on the channel as well. So I love my guy. It's a mix. We need depth, 100%, but I think the depth now has to come from within. By some of the first team players next season might need to become options off the bench. Mm-hmm. I just talked about Xhaka potentially being one of those in the middle, because we need to upgrade on someone. Emile Smith Rowe could be another one, for example. I think we need 2 strikers in the summer, so one of them would be depth. So I think it's a mix of depth, quality, and experience that we need, because with Tierney injured and a history of injuries, with Lacazette going, because he looks like he's going to go. Xhaka is the one left with the experience, his age, but not all experience is good experience. And, his time at the club is debatable. Maybe in the back room he's loved, but on the pitch he's not the right type of experience, because we've seen it. I've seen it. So we need a mix of quality now, because we've got a lot of young players that this season have really kicked on. The pressure and the burden that's been put on their shoulders, they've lit up under it, and it's not often you see that from one or two youngsters in pressure cooker situations, let alone the three we're seeing it from in Martinelli, Smith Rowe, and Saka over the season. Odegaard's young, he's just come in, he's another one, and so on. It's a young squad, youngest squad in the league, youngest manager, all of that. But I think we need probably three. The Tierney one's debatable, and Lee said to me,
there's a debate to be had there. To be fair,
Lee said it. Was it last night to me? Lee said we might need to look and get a first choice left back and have Tierney fight for the position. And Tierney's my candidate for captain, but that injury really, because as soon as I said it when the captaincy become available, everyone's argument was he's always injured. He didn't get injured all of this season up until this point, and then bang. And it's just like, would you make him?
Well, he
captain?
had that injury at the start, didn't he? Which Tavares got in on. So
yeah. But I mean, ever since Oba got stripped of the captaincy, he was in there and he was always consistent. So I think a striker, first team, a central midfielder / whatever it is, 8-6, whatever, to replace Xhaka, that needs to come in, and potentially a left back. Obviously, I hope Saliba comes back in too, because that's depth. That's ready-made depth. And then you start looking better, because if Tierney's fighting for the position, if Xhaka's back up to Partey and whoever we bring in, if we have two strikers, a different profile, and one's on the bench, it looks a whole lot better. Emile Smith-Rowe on the bench amongst them. We've looked at our bench sometime this season, Tom, and we've argued amongst ourselves whether Eddie comes on or Pepe comes on, and the argument's always the same: is it Eddie or Pepe, or is it Pepe or Smith-Rowe? That's been our depth all season, and the opportunity is there, but again, without Champions League football and that money, I doubt Arteta's going to get the right profile that he really wants.
Speaking of the manager, because I feel like I still haven't got my head around your viewpoint on him yet. If you finish in the top four, is it a new contract? If we finish outside the top four, where do you sit? What does it take for you to say no? I think we need to change.
If he finishes top four, I'd say contract. Yeah, I'd say if he finishes top four, contract. You don't go too long term with it. You still leave some room in there for him to extension. Fight. Yeah. Would he have a year left in the summer, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Finishing out of top four, going this close, and not only going this close, but being unable to seize the opportunity. And I'm always going to look around us and say it was our opportunity to seize this time. It's really let me down. What do we do in the summer? It's a funny question for me with Arteta, because I don't think he's good enough to ever take us to a league title, Tom. So
yeah.
But
not the evidence of that yet. No,
exactly. But at the same time, I believe he could leave at the right time or be replaced at the right time that allow us to look back at his time and say that guy helped, because he cleared our deck. He got rid of the egos, and he brought in good young players, and then the next manager built on it. That's still you still look back at that as good. I'm closer to that now, but at the same time, last year, as soon as Conte left Inter, I said, off the back of that Villarreal defeat and now Conte leaving Inter, a big club that really wants to change their ways, off the back of this Super League nonsense, off the back of ignoring fans for year on end, you'd bring in Conte. He's proven, you support him as a manager, and as a fan, if he's not getting supported, if he's not getting what he wants, if there's something to open up on, he's going to open up on it. He did it at Tottenham in January or February?
I think before that. I think it was within weeks of him taking over.
Yeah. And then he had that. He flipped in January when they went on that. They lost three. They beat City and then they lost to Burnley, and then he just flipped. He basically said me or them. Like, I don't know. Ever since then, Tottenham have lost one game to United. That's what Conte brings. It's either he's gonna go all in with it. As a fan, you can trust him. He wants to win. He wants to win, and he's going to do everything he can to get what he wants to win. I don't get that feeling with Arteta. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't get that feeling with any manager in the world aside from Pep, Klopp, Conte, and Simeone. I don't think there's any manager that I know will come in 100%, I can support them because I know they are demanding success as much as us fans. So this season, we haven't got that manager available in the transfer window. There isn't a Conte out there. There isn't a Pep or Klopp. There isn't a Simeone. So I don't know what we do with Arteta. Like, if anything, I don't know, Tom. If anything, you probably... I'd like the chapters...
I've said you don't renew. If you don't get top 4, you don't renew.
100%. 100% you don't renew. Yeah. You don't renew. And you potentially see what go. But again, Tom, that's me essentially saying, let's risk another season. How many seasons have we risked and, pardon my language, okay, not effed up in. Let me say effed up. How many seasons have we risked and effed up in? You know? I'm tired of taking these risks. I wanna go into a season, just charged. I want to go into a season with my chest out. I don't want my chest to come out mid-season. I want to go in as an Arsenal fan. When's the last time, Tom, we really went into a season as a fan base believing? It's been a hell of a long time.
You're talking Henry era, like that's you're talking, Wenger golden years, the last year that you really went in thinking, we're going to push for the title this year. It's been 20 nearly 20 years since that happened. So do you think that Arteta could make signings in the summer? Say what you said there about the players that you wanted. So, we get that marquee striker, whoever it is, I don't have to put a name on it. We get that midfielder, genuine world-class talent that comes in the summer. We sign someone as depth or competition for Tierney. Maybe we sign another centre-back if, say, Rob Holding moves on. We bring in maybe competition for Tomiyasu because of his injury issues at right-back. We bring in maybe a wide forward on top of it, like we've been linked to the likes of Cody Gakpo, who I really rate, and, he's someone I think would do wonders. But is that enough to give you confidence? Not that we challenge for a title, because I still think that's unrealistic at this stage, but that, we would be pushing ahead with, the manager making the correct decisions in the market and something to, get behind.
Well, I guess you're asking me if they do everything I need them to do, would I support it? Of course, Like, we have no divine right to win the league. I keep on saying this. I'm not saying go and win the league. What I'm saying to these owners and this, this club and the people inside, it's time to get us back to challenging. We want the emotion of being, in a race, not a top 4 race. Let's be honest. As much as we've enjoyed that part, what seemed like a top 4 race, and we're going to potentially get there. A lot of the young fans haven't seen a title race to know that feeling, whereas I have. So I want that race back. Essentially, that race is far off, but that's what I want back. And I want the club not to miss a window. Our manager said it. I think we can't afford to miss a window. We have done in January, but, at the end of the day, the January window might come up again next season. Because if Conte gets Champions League with Spurs, again, I'm going to look at January and say, well, he brought 2 players in, and their fan base was still not happy, Tom. The majority of Tottenham fans I spoke to were still not happy because they didn't address the fullback area. But they brought in 2 players. And guess what? Kulusevski was 3rd choice on their list. They wanted Diaz. Didn't happen. They wanted Traore. It didn't happen. They got the 3rd choice in their list, and he's added something to the race. So for me, if we do what I want us to do in the summer, of course, especially with players that are intriguing, exciting, players that I potentially want at the football club, I'm going to get behind it. But at the same time, January will come and it'll be another chance for them to do it again. We can't rest on our laurels with these owners and allow them windows to, for me, there's a balance. There's a balance between, if you love Arteta and you support Arteta, put pressure on the owners to make sure your man gets to the place you want him to be. If you don't like Arteta and you don't want him to be at the club, put pressure on the owners because they're the ones that brought him here. They're the ones that can make that decision. Either way, either camp. That's why I don't get why we're not united on the Kroenke front enough. Because either camp can actually agree on this, but we don't agree because it's just, it's madness.
Well, I think that's a good place to round off the conversation is where do you see kind of the perception of the fan base right now? How do you see the fan base? How do you see because, I wrote a piece the other day about it's after Brighton, it was ugly. The scenes, the clashes, the different ends of the spectrum, the things that were said, the things that weren't said in some cases. What do you make of where the Arsenal fan base is right now?
Do you know what? I actually don't know what you're talking about there. With the Brighton stuff. I haven't because I
Yeah,
actually don't
really.
go on social media much.
You
Funnily enough,
lucky thing.
yeah, I choose to ignore it, man. Getting caught
Yeah.
up in all that. So I actually don't know what you're talking about. It's unfortunate to hear that, but majority of this all of this season, I think the fan base
Mm.
deserve an awful lot of credit, especially the match going fans that have turned around the
Hmm.
atmosphere. Like the club asked, positive fans asked for the atmosphere to be up for us to really get behind, and I think the fans have done that throughout the season. But I still think some of the standards are still they're not matching up. They're not matching
Yeah.
up, and that's and it's in a much. Listen, Arteta came in and he said, number one, the fan need to connect back to the club, and we need to get them believing in a sense again. I think he's gone a long way to improving that 100%, and he deserves a lot. Like I said, if he moves on and
Mm.
another manager takes over and builds, and then we achieve success, I think we can look back at this period and be grateful because of things like that. But it's
It's a big if.
essentially, it's a massive if, and
Yeah.
and that's what the fan base is full of, ifs.
Mm.
I'd rather deal with the now and try and apply the pressure as much as I can. And I'm not saying I'm doing the most I can because I've got a
Mm.
life to live too. I've got a son to look after and so on.
Yeah.
But every time I speak, people are like, "Oh, Turkish brought up Kroenke." I'm always going to bring up Kroenke, always, because I don't think not enough. I don't think enough people bring him up. So I'm always going to, because I believe every situation that you can bring to the plate, Tom, I can
Mm.
bring it back to Kroenke because it all goes back to him.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you. I think that, you look at what happens at a football club and it's always going to go back to the owner. Because if the owner was applying pressure, if the owner was more demanding, etc., you would see the evidence of that. If say Josh Kroenke had the mentality, to turn around and say, why didn't we sign someone in January or before the end of the window? We're not getting a striker, and then Arteta goes, or we can't find, the players that are out there. They're not good enough, or that we don't deem them good enough. You'd want the person overseeing things to go, well, find someone, because if we don't bring anyone in, we're going to be in trouble. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes you need that. So, and maybe that's why not having a sporting director. I know we've got a technical director in Edu, but they're very much in line. Edu's not in charge of Arteta. They're very much on a level playing field, and maybe that's that extra additional too much power is a bad thing. I mean, we saw that at the end of the Arsene Wenger era. Is one person with too much power in too many different departments. And when we started to move away from that, I thought it was going to move into a good direction. Unfortunately, we picked the wrong person in Raul Sanyehi, in my opinion. So it failed, but it's that extra demand that we need, and I think you're right, and I hope that Josh does that. And if he genuinely is, as he says, intent on seeing Arsenal return to being an invincible club, as he spoke about during the Super Bowl period, then you'd expect him to be more demanding. You'd hope he would be more demanding. We don't know, obviously, what goes on behind the scenes exactly, but you'd hope so. But the evidence is that hasn't happened as much as we would like it to. I don't want to ignore Jashar's super chat, who says the Ramsdale and White money should have been used towards improving the midfield and attack, and I felt that those signings were to recover the Arteta mistakes made previously on Emi and Saliba. I personally slightly disagree with that, Jashar. What I would say is that we've always need to bring in a top quality centre back. I think White has had a really solid season from my perspective. I've really enjoyed seeing what he's brought to the team. I think it's changed the way we play out from the back and what we do with our centre backs. What I would say is that the way in which we handled the Saliba situation certainly wasn't good, and maybe we could have benefited from him sooner if we'd have sorted out a loan at the beginning of the 2020-21 season. I think it was that season. Yeah, I think it was the 2021 season when whatever happened during that year, we messed it up. But I think he's benefited now, and hopefully he comes back. Regarding Ramsdale, I think we got a better keeper in the end out of it. To be honest, I prefer Ramsdale to Emi Martinez. It's just my view. Any final thoughts on that before we wrap up, Turkish?
I understand Yashar's point. I think Ramsdale's for me out of the two. I think Ramsdale's signing is the more integral, and I think we could have coped without the White signing had we had spent the 50 million elsewhere. But I agree with you. White has added to the game, and hopefully Saliba comes back and they're all competing for it, which should push them on more. But I understand what you mean, because we all knew we needed an upgrade in midfield. We all knew we needed a striker in to be a threat to Oba and improvement on Laka and Eddie. In the end, those two positions kind of come back to bite us also, along with the left back situation. But that's why we're going to look back and say we should have spent the money in the positions we really needed to spend in.
Yeah, and I think that this summer coming up is going to prove or disprove, a lot of points about what we see. Because at the end of the day, wherever we finish, the reality is I don't think Arteta is going to go anywhere. I think he'll still be here. I think that we're pretty much all going to make peace with that. But it's going to be about what we do and how we react to whatever happens at the end of the season. Turkish, thank you so much, mate, for taking the time this evening to have a chat. Always a pleasure. And tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
No worries, man. Turkish LDN, YouTube, Twitter. Not that I use it much, Instagram. But yeah, it's Turkish LDN, all platforms. And yeah, all I really do these days is the big six and do my content on AFTV. I see a lot of people, familiar faces in the chat. Love for the love people. And yeah, appreciate Tom. It's always a good chat anyway. We'll do this more often. You got my number now anyway, so yeah, that's the best way to contact. So all good.
There you go. Yeah, communication established. Love it. And you'll see Turkish back on the show, I'm sure, very soon. But thank you again, mate. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening, guys behind the scenes. Really appreciate your time as well. Do drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new, and make sure you check out Turkish's stuff over on AFTV. We will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.